the Indian subcontinent as well as vaccinations available in North America and the UK. First, we'll start with our disclaimer. The actual video will start in about 3 minutes time, so persons watching may wish to scroll the video up to 3 minutes. I'll start with my disclaimer. My name is Dr. S. Rawat. I did my primary medical education from India, my postgraduate MD in family medicine from the UK. As a family physician, I feel my job, my specialty is to engage with patients, to explain medical concepts to them, and advise them so that they can make wise, healthy choices. The information on my blog is accurate as per the date that it is published. Medical information does change dynamically, and it is natural that my opinions would also change as those change. The advice I give is my opinion. It is not specific medical advice. I recommend that anyone who needs specific medical advice should seek it from their own family physician. We do have an element of chatting where we have YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Google Meet where we discuss things. But I would request everyone to keep everything anonymous and confidential. If you have any specific questions, please try to ask them in a third-party kind of sense, so that we can give general third-party anonymous answers, so that we do not inadvertently breach anyone's confidentiality. So we have a fair few number of people joining us today. So let's have a look. Here we are. And I will just need a minute now just to check the streams, and everyone is welcome to just chat among themselves for a minute while I do that. How's everyone doing today?
Fine, thank you.
God bless you, Dr. Safan.
It's nice to see a lot of new faces today. A lot of people who I have met before, but it's nice to see a lot of new faces. Miss Lamba ji, अपने बारे में बताएं, please. Please tell us about yourself.
Anji, my name is Harsh Lamba. I'm a friend of Chaya's, so she recommended me. She sent me your link, and then she said we're going to have a very interesting subject today. And she always speaks very highly about you. So I thought I'm going to join it.
Thank you so much. And Miss Kalathil, I think this is the first time you've come today as well. So please tell us about yourself. You are muted right now. Yes, if you just press on the screen, it's the first button among those three buttons you have.
Hello?
Hello, hi. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear. Okay. Yeah, I'm one of Chari's friends, and yeah, she recommended about this talk. So I'm very interested to know more about what is happening in the vaccination thing.
Yes, and so our talk won't be restricted just to vaccines, though. I know if after the vaccines, if anyone has questions about other COVID-19 related matters, as an example, if you'd like to talk about mutations in the virus and how that may affect us, if you have other COVID-19 related questions, then of course you'll be more than welcome to ask those questions as well. I'm just going to check. I'm just checking my live stream right now to make sure it's working, and it does appear to be working. Very good.
Seema, just say a little bit about yourself, what you are, and we are happy to, Sapan, be happy to have you in the group.
Yeah, the thing is, by profession, I'm a computer engineer, but few years back, I switched my field to the nutrition thing, and I did a holistic. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist from Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. So now I am consulting. I'm a nutritional consultant, and I'm helping people with meal planning and some of the health concerns what they are facing. So that's in a short short way I can explain myself.
That's great, Simaji. So, in
Yeah.
fact, our topic next week will be how we can adopt an
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory diet. So,
Yes. Yes.
Simaji, I'm sure will be talking. We will talk a lot about
Yes.
anti-inflammatory
Mm-hmm.
diet. So, what things are pro-inflammatory
Yes.
and what things would be anti-inflammatory. So that will be a very important topic that
Yes.
Simaji and I will be covering next week. And
Yes.
Simaji, we need to
So
talk
the thing is,
among ourselves.
yeah, I've already prepared the material, what I would be talking and all. Yeah, if you want, I can forward it to you.
Yes, yes, we'll have a discussion among ourselves before
Okay.
the actual talk. Yes, we will get in touch. But
Okay. Yeah.
that will be a very interesting talk. So I can see we have
Mm.
viewers already on Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live. I am monitoring. Uh, I'm monitoring the message page. So if you have any questions, we can get those from Facebook and YouTube as well. So I think we can start with the actual talk now. I just request everyone to mute themselves. So I'll just go ahead and mute Seema ji. I believe you logged in from your husband's Google account, which is why your actual name didn't show up. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen, and please let me know if there's any problem with the screen share. So this was my 23rd blog. As you can see, I've written 23 blogs now. So this was my 23rd blog here. Let's talk about that. Covid-19 vaccines. Bharat Biotech versus Oxford and Pfizer versus Moderna. Now we shouldn't use the word versus. It's not a competition. We need as many vaccines as possible. If we want to stand any chance of flattening this pandemic, then we need all the vaccines we can get. But there is some element of competition in the sense that if a patient is offered two vaccines, and then you should be in a position where you can choose one over the other. So let's talk about the differences between these vaccines and some possible pros and cons of these vaccines. So first, we'll talk about the Bharat Biotech vaccine. This is a completely indigenous vaccine. It's being researched from NIV Pune, Serum Institute of India. From the development phase till the production phase, it's all been an all Indian vaccine. It's what we describe as an inactivated vaccine, which is you could describe as the oldest platform. Several of the vaccines which we use on a regular basis, such as polio vaccine, typhoid vaccine, are often inactivated vaccines. So what happens there? The virus is grown in a lab, and I understand that the Bharat Biotech facility has tons of SARS-CoV-2 virus, and then it is inactivated, so killed. Like, that could be done through radiation, through certain chemicals like formalin or formaldehyde. It might be done through radiation. In any case, that virus is killed and then produced in a vaccine form to be given to the body. So what the body does is it recognizes the proteins present in that killed vaccine. Other countries have also produced this kind of vaccine. China has two vaccines, Sinopharm and Sinovac, which are now being used in other parts of the world, such as the UAE and Bahrain. And it is generally considered to be a very safe platform, mainly because it has no live components. It is an old platform, and in theory, there are certain pros As an example, because it produces the entire virus to the body, not just the spike protein. We hear a lot about spike protein. What is a spike protein? So we have a coronavirus and it has spikes, and it uses those spikes to get into your cells. It's like a lock and key mechanism. Almost all the other vaccines, and certainly the other 3 vaccines we'll be talking about today, use antibodies. They produce antibodies versus the spike protein. But that's not the case with Bharat Biotech. Bharat Biotech vaccine produces it against the whole virus. So that would also include other proteins like the nucleocapsid protein, membrane protein, etc. And there is a hypothetical advantage that it may tackle mutations better. Because we tend to worry about mutations in the spike protein, in the receptor binding domain, perhaps in the receptor binding moiety, and because this would attack the virus not just on the spike but also the other parts, there may be a hypothetical advantage. Of course, there is no data to back that because this is a very new vaccine. Phase 1 and phase 2 trials. Phase 1 being initial preclinical trials in animals, followed by phase 1 trials in which we check for we decide on doses and we check immunogenicity, and phase 2 trials, which is mainly for safety, were very, very good. The vaccine did equally well compared to other vaccines in that phase. There is a hypothetical advantage that the strain of virus being used to produce it would be the one that is most prevalent in India at that time, and also that the phase 3 trials, which has enrolled over 25,000 candidates in India, is being done in India. As we will see with the other candidates, even with AstraZeneca, majority of the trials have been done abroad. It is stored at normal fridge temperature. There are large production and distribution facilities, and it's very affordable at about $4 per dose. So those are the advantages or pros of the Bharat Biotech indigenous Indian vaccine. But let's come to the cons, because I know there's been a lot of controversy, which I feel was unfortunate. In any case, let's talk about the cons. Simply, efficacy is not known because the license was given before the efficacy data, the phase 3 data became available. Now that might be because the company was having difficulty enrolling people into the phase 3 trial, hence the license was given in a trial mode. So all patients who receive this vaccine will be enrolled onto the trial, and they will have to be followed up as if in a trial. Those people who receive Bharat Biotech vaccine will need to sign a consent form like would be in a normal trial. So the main con of this vaccine is that phase 3 data is not available yet. With inactivated virus vaccines, we do tend to be a bit concerned about efficacy, because when you kill the virus, you can also end up denaturing the proteins, which then need to be exposed to the immune system, which can make these vaccines in some cases less efficacious. However, in the case of many other vaccines like polio and tetanus, these are actually very effective. So until the data is published, we don't really know what the efficacy is. If I was asked to guess, I would say I wouldn't expect it to be any less than the adenovirus vaccines, for example. WHO stipulates that any vaccine to be licensed should have above 50% efficacy. I would be very surprised if this had less than 50%, mainly because this is a time-tested technique of producing vaccines, and the phase 1 and phase 2 trials were very promising. The immunogenicity data was very strong, and I would be very surprised if that did not translate into good phase 3 study data. What Bharat Biotech themselves say is that among the 11,000 patients who had already received the first dose, they state that no one got Covid-19, which suggests that the data should be very good. But that is not the final data. That will probably come in about a month or 6 weeks or so. Next, let's talk about the Oxford vaccine. Oxford vaccine is a different type of vaccine. The experts describe it as a DNA recombinant vector vaccine. It is 2 doses, about 4 weeks apart, similar to Bharat Biotech. This is a different type of vaccine. Here, this was a platform initially developed for Ebola virus. In this, you use a live virus which has been derived from a chimpanzee, from a monkey. The live adenovirus is a virus which causes a common cold in monkeys. That live virus is then genetically modified. There is genetic engineering done within that virus. 2 things are done mainly. One thing is that it is made non-replicating, which means once it gets into the body, it will not be able to replicate. Secondly, a part of DNA which would encode for the spike protein of the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, is integrated into this virus. So it's turned into, you could describe as a hybrid virus. Essentially, DNA, adenovirus chimpanzee with spikes from a SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then that live virus is put into the body. There are some hypothetical pros of this. It's a live vaccine, so these types of vaccines apparently stimulate a good T-cell response, non-antibody response because of the live virus. It is stable at fixed temperature for 6 months. There are large distribution facilities. I understand a third of all vaccines will be produced in Serum Institute in Pune. It's affordable at $4 per dose. It is AstraZeneca. They say they're not making any money out of it. They will be giving it until the pandemic lasts at cost value, so to the cost that it takes them to produce this. Efficacy data is about 62%, which is about WHO of 50%. So not as good as the vaccine we'll be discussing later, the Pfizer and Moderna, but better than the WHO minimum standard. So those are the pros of the Oxford vaccine. But let's talk about the negatives as well. So live vaccines can be more reactogenic because your immune system is reacting to something which is live. There can be some element of misfiring which can happen. There were 2 cases in the UK of neurological side effects. There were 2 cases of transverse myelitis. Now, AstraZeneca state that they investigated and they felt they were not related. But a lot of virologists and immunologists will tell you that neurological complications such as transverse myelitis, Bell's palsy, etc. can be more common with live virus vaccines. And that is something that we have to be mindful of. Generally, live vaccines are avoided in pregnant women and immunocompromised patients. Most of the trials were done abroad. I believe a handful of patients in India, perhaps about 1,000 were vaccinated in a trial done in India. I feel the marketing of this vaccine has been misleading at times. What happened with the Oxford vaccine was a small subset of patients, I believe out of 60,000 patients, about 2,500 or so received the wrong dose of vaccine. Instead of receiving 2 full doses, they received a half dose first followed by a full dose later. In that small subset of patients, which really should not be considered as representative of this vaccine, the efficacy calculated at about 90%. Now, of course, you have to realize when the subset is very small changes, 1 or 2 patients extra with COVID-19 in one group versus the other, can change the percentage largely. And AstraZeneca came out saying, in this dose, we are 90% effective. I feel that was being a bit disingenuous. That was not the original dose. That was not the dose used in phase 1 and phase 2, and it was used in a very small number of patients. Later, AstraZeneca came out saying they're 70% effective when used, and then they used an average of that small subset which was given that dose by mistake and the larger subset which was given the proper dose. Again, I feel that was disingenuous as well. The actual efficacy is 62%. and that is the dose which has been licensed both in the UK and now in India as well. So I think AstraZeneca should have and Oxford should have come clean on that. I feel there was this degree of competition that they were trying to do with Pfizer and Moderna, because those were shown to be 95% efficacious, and they did try to do some degree of marketing to try to make the vaccine look better than it actually is. There is one more problem that can be with adenovirus vector vaccines, and certainly this is something which was also seen with the CanSino vaccine, which was a China-Canada collaboration vaccine, which is also adenovirus vaccine. With that vaccine, the problem was a bit more so because they used a human adenovirus, not a chimpanzee adenovirus, which is that if you have a natural immunity against that adenovirus, which is the vector, which is the platform which is being used, then that can make the vaccine itself less efficacious. So that has been, which is a bit of a problem with adenovirus vector platforms, which might explain why this is less efficacious. However, to be fair, sometimes we are being a bit unfair when we talk about efficacy. We are here talking about efficacy with regards to getting COVID-19, but we're not talking about efficacy with regards to getting severe COVID-19 or efficacy with regards to dying because of COVID-19. Although this vaccine is 62% effective in stopping you from getting COVID-19, the remaining 38% patients did not get sick, and those remaining 38% did not die because of COVID-19. So if we were to say efficacy with regards to stopping a person from dying of COVID-19, from that point of view, all of these vaccines, well, at least the three vaccines which have efficacy data so far have been 100% effective. So it also depends how you define the efficacy of a vaccine. To be fair, with this adenovirus vaccine, even from animal studies, we knew it would not have a very high efficacy. It would not produce what we describe as sterilizing immunity. With certain vaccines like MMR, for example, we expect sterilizing immunity, which means we expect those vaccines to stop you from getting the illness in the first place. With this vaccine, from day one, we knew that would not happen, because when they did chimpanzee studies, monkey studies, they gave very high doses within the lung by spray, intubation and spray, to those monkeys, very high doses. So the monkeys died as a result of that. After given the vaccination, the Oxford vaccination, out of those 5 monkeys, 4 monkeys did not get COVID-19, while the 5th monkey did get COVID-19, however did not die because of it. So even from the animal study data's phase, which was before stage 1 data, we knew this would not give us sterilizing antibody, but it would stop us from dying. And my argument is that's what we want. Of course, from the point of view of stopping spread of the pandemic, having more sterilizing vaccine response is more useful, because there's less chance that you would spread it to other people. However, the main thing we want to stop in this pandemic is death. And from that point of view, all 3 vaccines which have efficacy data actually have very good efficacy data with regards to reducing death from COVID-19. Let's talk about Pfizer BioNTech next. So Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are now licensed in North America and in the UK, along with other countries as well. This is the mRNA vaccine. The platform itself is brand new for human vaccines, although it has been used for the last 10 years for other things. It has been used for chemotherapy related to cancer therapy, etc., but not for human vaccines. Pfizer is 2 doses 3 weeks apart. It showed about 95% efficacy. Interestingly, that was checked 1 week after the second dose, so it was checked 4 weeks after the first dose. mRNA vaccines can very easily be adapted for mutations, and they can be produced very quickly, which is why these vaccines were first out of the gates. Till now, about 5 million doses of mRNA vaccines, which is both the Pfizer and Moderna, have been administered, and apart from slightly increased risk of allergic reactions, there is really no other safety signal coming out, which shows that these are actually very safe vaccines. Also, there is multinational production capacity. How an mRNA vaccine works is it's actually a fairly simplified vaccine in that instead of giving your body a live virus with a protein or giving your body a protein itself, as an example, there is a vaccine coming out called Novavax, which is a protein subunit vaccine. In this case, what is injected is an mRNA. mRNA is a messenger RNA which is surrounded by something called a lipid nanoparticle, which is essentially a fat membrane. Injected into your body, the muscles and other fibroblasts, antigen presenting cells like macrophages will take up that nanoparticle. The mRNA then from the cytoplasm would produce the protein that you want, which is the spike protein, which would then get expressed on the surface, and that is how your body would then produce antibodies against this. So in some ways, it's a very simplified vaccine, which also reduces risk of side effects, I feel, because there are not too many moving parts like we see in basic engineering. The more moving parts you have, the more likely there is of having some kind of problem. Of course, Pfizer is a big international company, and it has large production capacity. I would urge people to read about the founders of BioNTech. This is the founders are a husband and wife, Turkish couple who emigrated to Germany and produced this company called BioNTech, which has been at the forefront of several cancer therapies, and now this vaccine, which will save millions of lives. Also, I would urge you to read about the CEO and founder of Moderna, the other vaccine we're talking about. That was, I believe, a Lebanese person who emigrated to Canada when he was a kid. He did his primary education from Canada. He then moved to the US to do his PhD and produced the vaccine, and now has Moderna. So these are both very, very nice immigration stories. Both the founder of of BioNTech, and the founder of Moderna are both very interesting immigration stories of people who moved from other countries to come to this country. Now, talking about the cons of the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine, there have been 11 cases of severe allergic reaction among 1 million doses given so far. Among all the doses given so far, which comes to about 1 in 100,000 cases. Now, I know that the media is following every single severe allergic reaction, but 1 in 100,000 is widely regarded as a safe risk level for most vaccines. In fact, a lot of vaccines, like the rotavirus vaccine we give to children, has a much higher risk level than this. It is relatively expensive at about $20 a shot. The minus 70 degree storage is a logistical challenge, and I worry a bit that the efficacy may be affected if it's not handled properly. And in theory, there is a risk of possible long-term effects because we don't know. This kind of technology has never been used in humans before, but I think that is highly unlikely because as scientists, we understand how it works, and it's a very simple method. Next, talking about the Moderna vaccine. So again, this is 2 doses, but not 3 weeks apart like Pfizer. This is 4 weeks apart. For disease, it showed about 94% efficacy and 100% efficacy for serious disease. There was one case in Pfizer arm which did get serious disease, but he survived. So for death from COVID-19 prevention, all 3 of these vaccines, Oxford, Pfizer, and Moderna, are 100% efficacious. But Moderna is particularly good, 94% for disease, 100% for serious disease. It actually showed 80% efficacy after the first dose itself, which is actually higher than the Pfizer. Pfizer was around about 50 to 60%. Being an mRNA vaccine, it can be produced quickly and adapted for mutations quickly. It appears to have fewer serious allergic reactions. However, Moderna does appear to have more reactions generally. The usual reactions you get, body pain, fever, pain at site, appears to be more with Moderna. It is more reactogenic, but less severe allergy symptoms. The cons of this vaccine, it's the most expensive vaccine, about $30 a shot. As we discussed previously, both Oxford and Bharat Biotech are about $3 to $4 a shot. This is about $30 a shot. Moderna is quite new to this game. It doesn't have large production facilities. It does have a -30 freezer storage, which is also a logistical challenge. Not as bad as Pfizer though, which is -70. Like I said, it appears to be more reactogenic, and it's a brand new technology. So we have to mention that long term, we will have to keep surveying these vaccines. Although in my mind, this is highly unlikely, as these are, as I said, very simple vaccines. Some promising COVID-19 vaccines we should discuss in the pipeline. India has the Xylus Cadila vaccine, which could be the first DNA vaccine to be licensed if it passes its trials. In the US, you have Johnson & Johnson, which is a single-dose adenovirus vaccine. We're expecting phase 3 trials to report next month on that one. This also has quite normal fridge storage, unlike the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines in North America. So this could also be a game changer. But because it's single dose, we would have to look at the efficacy data very carefully. I'm personally feeling a bit skeptical that a single dose will be able to give such a good dose response. Now, a lot of you will be thinking, well, what do I do now that I'm waiting for the vaccine? Is there anything I can do? This is the time where I throw in a bit of a googly. In baseball, we say curveball. Let's talk about non-COVID vaccinations for COVID-19. Let's talk about something that you could do while you're waiting for this vaccine. So you could get your annual flu shot. You could get a blood test to check if you have low titers of measles, mumps, rubella, or varicella. You could get your pneumonia and shingles vaccination if you're above the age of 50. So let's talk about those. This study here showed that there is an inverse relationship between the amount of mumps antibodies you have and the severity of COVID-19. They tested this in COVID-19 patients. And for this reason, I recommend anyone who's above the age of 40 should consider getting their MMRV antibodies checked. And that would allow us to give you MMR or MMRV or a varicella shot if your titers are low. Being live vaccines, there is scientific hypothesis that live vaccines, including BCG as well, which is also being studied, can boost your innate immune response, which is your primary first 2 weeks baseline innate response to vaccines. This is the study we're talking about. They checked patients with who had recovered from COVID-19, and they found that patients who had high titers of mumps through vaccination, not through natural infection, were associated with asymptomatic COVID-19. Patients with medium titers of mumps had COVID-19 disease, and those patients who had low titers of mumps antibody had severe COVID-19. And all these links are on my blog, so I would recommend that you should read these. This study here from the Mayo Clinic in the US showed that all patients who had received vaccines, and this was multiple vaccines, Hib, which is H influenza, B, other kinds of vaccines, were getting less COVID-19. And in particular, they pointed out pneumonia vaccination. The study is this one here from the Mayo Clinic. And in particular, when they did a subgroup analysis, they found significantly lower SARS-CoV-2 in Black individuals who had taken the Prevnar 13 or the first pneumonia vaccine. Pneumonia vaccine is usually a 2-vaccine course. First, it's licensed from age 50. First, you receive a vaccine called Prevnar 13, which is a conjugate vaccine. After 2 months, you receive the second vaccine. which is Pneumovax 23. Although the Prevnar 13 covers you for 13 different types of strains of pneumonia, and the Pneumovax 23 covers you for 23 strains, Prevnar 13, being a newer conjugated vaccine, appears to confer a stronger and longer immune response. So above the age of 50, I recommend patients get pneumonia vaccination, which is Prevnar 13 followed in 2 months' time by Pneumovax 23. It's quite important to take the Prevnar 13 first, because if you take the Pneumovax 23 first, then the Prevnar 13 has to be delayed by 12 months. And so that you can get this all done within 2 months, it's better to take the Prevnar 13 first, followed by Pneumovax 23. There is a trial taking place in Oklahoma where they are investigating whether shingles vaccine may reduce SARS-CoV-2. Now, this is a trial; it hasn't been reported yet, but it is interesting. And I would also say there have been documented cases of shingles, which is a reactivation of herpes zoster, in patients with COVID-19. Now, as we know, shingles is a nasty condition. It can lead to chronic pain afterwards. And so, even if it is not effective, it still makes sense for patients who are above the age of 50 to go ahead and now get their shingles vaccination. Generally, it's a vaccine called Shingrix. It is 2 injections, 2 months apart. This is 3 studies, 1 from Holland and 2 studies from Italy. This first study from the Netherlands, they demonstrated in cell studies that patients who had the flu vaccine demonstrated a better cytokine response to COVID-19 when they got that. And they also demonstrated that hospital staff who had received the flu vaccine got less COVID-19 compared to those who had not received it. The second is an observational study from Italy, which also demonstrated that the rates of COVID-19 was inversely proportional to the rates of influenza vaccine. And the third study here is the Italian regional-based study, which also showed that there was a correlation between areas with high influenza vaccination having less COVID-19 and the inverse, areas with less influenza vaccine having more COVID-19, particularly those above the age of 65. And I would urge you all to have a look at all of these studies. This is the Holland-based study of Dutch hospital staff. This is the Italian study, which showed the relationship between influenza vaccination and COVID-19 incidence. So it's an observational study. And this is the third Italian study, which took a more regional response, but they were on a scatter graph able to demonstrate that low flu vaccination showed higher COVID incidence. So that is the talk for today. And I would like to welcome everyone here who is with us. And we can now go ahead and open the forum for any questions we have. Perhaps we could start off with vaccination-related questions, and then after that we could have any general questions related to COVID-19 or any other vaccination. Very happy to say that both my parents and in-law, my father-in-law, are here today.
Just a little clarification, Saban. When you use the term adopted for mutation, what does that mean?
Yeah, so mRNA vaccines are the fastest vaccines to get out of the blocks. I'll just go ahead and mute you, Chad, because the voice is echoing. I've done it. So these were the fastest to come out of the blocks. Because these are very simple to produce. What happens is once you have the genetic code, and China had given the genetic code of the virus to us very early on the 11th of Jan, the whole world had the genetic code of the virus. Once the genetic code was with us, then the mRNA vaccines could get on to producing it. As simple as that. Because it's a very simple virus. If you think about Bharat Biotech, You have to have large quantities of virus. You have to then inactivate it using radiation or chemicals or other modalities. And then you have to stabilize it and produce a vaccine. The mRNA vaccines, in comparison, are very straightforward. You have a genetic sequence which you have to just surround with a lipid nano layer that you have produced and simply inject. So because they are very simple, the sequence of DNA sequence, which is essentially a sequence of amino acids, can just be changed according to the mutations. In fact, Pfizer tested their vaccine against the UK strain, and they showed that it is effective for the strain. But even if it had not been, they had said that within 6 weeks they could change the vaccine to be effective against the strain. So these vaccines can very quickly be adapted. Of course, there are those who will say that the Bharat Biotech vaccine, because it is not targeting just the spike protein, which is the spikes of the protein, and it is targeting the entire virus, will be by definition better for mutations anyways, because it is looking at the whole virus, not just one part of the virus. So anyone who would like to ask questions can please go ahead. We have people watching on Facebook as well as YouTube, and I would encourage them to type in questions if they'd like to as well.
I just have one more question, and I'll keep quiet. When do we expect, as you know, Canadian, when do we expect to hear from that we got a vaccine for you? And second part of this question, do we have choice of choosing the vaccine that we would like to have?
Yeah, so it's unlikely that we will have a choice, to be fair, especially in North America. I think the logistics of it is what's driving it. So Pfizer with the minus 70 degree storage is going to be primarily hospital based, because general medical clinics do not have minus 70 degree refrigerators. So and Moderna with the minus 30 freezer storage will be easier to ship out into rural communities, to nursing homes, etc. If the Oxford vaccine becomes licensed in Canada, then that is something which you can be stored in your doctor's office, because it is normal fridge temperature. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is coming out next month, is also normal fridge temperature. But of course, it's a single dose vaccine. I would be looking at the efficacy data very carefully, because I personally feel a bit skeptical about how efficacious a single dose vaccine would be without any booster.
Hi, Dr. Sapan. Yeah, thank you. It was a really good talk for people like me or layman to understand about the vaccination or vaccines. I have a few observations and a couple of questions also. My first one is, we have been seeing very inconsistent procedural, methods across various authorities. Like UK has approved AstraZeneca or Oxford, and Canadian government is saying, oh, we do not have the data, so we cannot approve it. Then second one is, UK has delayed the second shot from requirement from 4 weeks to 12 weeks. They're saying, hey, we are gonna, give first dose to as many as people. And it seems Quebec is also following that. And then Ontario is saying that, oh, no, if we don't give the second dose within 4 weeks, then there are the chances that there may be mutations. So both doses are required. And then third one is, sorry, it's a long one, but all are correlated. And then third one is, I was reading the media or various articles published, and they're talking about efficacies being big scams. They're saying these are kind of marketing, because even if you place placebos 100%, even those placebos will have 60% of efficacy, because only 40% people are getting sick. And even out of those 40%, they are saying 40% are asymptomatic. So nobody is seeing how many people were asymptomatic, what were, and these efficacies are just hypothetical scenarios. So, what's your observation or thought about these general concerns, or what I should say, more knowledge we want to have about these vaccines?
Yes, that's a very good question, Ashish. So I'll tackle them one by one. With regards to the dosage, whether it should be as has been studied, which is 3 weeks apart, 4 weeks apart, or as the UK is now doing, pushing it to 12 weeks to be able to give as many doses as possible to as many people for the first time, that is a gamble. We should really just be doing what's being studied in the trials, because that's what the data is for. When we say that we are approving a vaccine because of efficacy data, that efficacy data was derived out of a dose schedule which was 3 or 4 weeks apart. It was not derived out of a dose schedule which is 3 months apart. And so if there was a voluntary change to that, then the science is not being followed. So certainly agree with those who say that, and with the FDA, because FDA also criticized the UK government's decision to do that. However, I can understand the UK government's decision on two levels. One is on the level of giving some protection to as many people as possible. So that is a logistical decision. They say that after the first dose itself, no one died of COVID-19. So this kind of correlates with the efficacy question that you had. Now let's talk about the efficacy really quick. You're right. Even the companies themselves have not tested efficacy equally. Moderna tested efficacy 1 week after the second dose, which was in 4 weeks' time. Pfizer tested efficacy 2 weeks after the second dose, which was in 4 weeks' time. They did not test SARS-CoV-2 in asymptomatic patients. However, Oxford did test all their trial volunteers, so they also picked up asymptomatic. So when we say that Moderna and Pfizer are 95%, they could be missing a lot of asymptomatics. While it might be that Oxford 62% is actually the true efficacy, because they tested both asymptomatic as well as symptomatic. However, I would go as far to say, who cares about those questions, those numbers? What actually matters is efficacy for stopping death from COVID-19, because yesterday 15,000 people died of COVID-19 in the world. Over 4,000 of those people were in the US itself. 5 countries had more than 1,000 people dying yesterday because of COVID-19. So far, the vaccine has been given to 5 million people for the mRNA vaccines. It has been given to hundreds of thousands of people. I believe the UK vaccinated 250,000 people in the first month, in December. So far, no one who has received the full dosage of COVID-19 vaccines has died of COVID-19. When that happens, you will see it in the news, because the news will make a big headline out of it. But if we just consider efficacy as the risk of surviving COVID-19, from that point of view, these vaccines are excellent.
And that's what these articles were also talking about. They said that let's not worry about efficacies, because 95% being projected could be only 60 or 65%. Pfizer may also be. So whatever vaccine is available, take them, because ultimately all of them are gonna have some kind of protection against this virus.
That's right. Now, there was in the news, in case any person here who's been following the anti-vax kind of media, there was one case in the news of a nurse in California who died of COVID-19 7 days after receiving the Pfizer vaccine. So he died of COVID-19. But we have to bear in mind, COVID-19 has an incubation period of on average 7 days, anything from 3 days to 21 days, which means it is growing inside your body for on average about 7 days before you get your first symptoms. After you get your first symptoms, on average for about 10 to 14 days, you have a flu-like illness, after which in about 15 to 20%, depending upon risk factors, patients may develop hyperinflammation, blood clotting, etc., which can then lead to an ICU admission or a hospital admission. So if this patient, this nurse in California died of COVID-19 7 days after vaccination, the likelihood is he already had COVID-19 at the time of vaccination. Plus, even the earliest antibody studies which have been done for a single dose have been done 2 weeks after vaccination, not within a week. So we cannot say this was a vaccine failure. This was an unfortunate case of a patient who received the vaccine too late. Had he received the vaccine perhaps a few weeks ago, he may have survived. In fact, in the Johnson & Johnson arm, there was a news article about 2 months ago of a patient in the Johnson & Johnson arm who died of COVID-19. So there was a lot of speculation in the news that patient in the Johnson trial dies of COVID-19. And then when they unblinded it, which means they opened the envelope to check whether that particular patient had received vaccination or placebo, it was found that he had received placebo. So he had not received the vaccine anyways. And so again, an unfortunate situation. I feel that had he received the vaccination, likelihood is that he would have survived and not died of COVID-19.
Thank you.
I think Seemaji has a question. You're muted, Seemaji. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. ठीक. Thank you.
Sapan, I was reading a news item that the variant from South Africa cannot be treated with the present vaccines available. One, and second is, here our government is doing the vaccination on the basis of prior registration only. What is the method that other countries have adopted in maybe in Canada, US or UK?
Yeah, the methods across the board are very similar, Daddy. With regards to the whether the vaccine will work or not, it is hypothetical at this time. I believe that the vaccine makers are testing the virus in the labs. Had that been the case, that would be a very big headline, and I haven't come across that, so I'm fairly sure that is still a hypothetical. It hasn't been proven as of yet. But I must say that all the virologists that I'm following, they tend to be a bit more concerned about the South Africa strain than the UK strain. But it might be that the Bharat Biotech is a better option for strains, because like I said, the Bharat Biotech vaccine, it attacks the entire virus, not just one part of the virus. When we talk about mutations, we're talking about changes to the amino acid sequence, which could be a deletion, it could be a replacement, which happens on the spike of the protein, particularly in a very specific part of the spike protein, perhaps the receptor binding domain or the receptor binding moiety. But the Bharat Biotech vaccine will also attack the membrane nucleocapsid. It'll attack the nucleocapsid vaccine. Although the efficacy data of phase 3 trials is not being completed yet, it has been given in one dose to over 25,000 candidates, but the second dose hasn't been given and the efficacy data has not been collated yet. There is that hypothetical which may give it an advantage. We will find out in the next month or two. With regards to how it is done in Canada and US, very similar. The first line is health workers and nursing homes, so very elderly patients, and then it will probably come down by age brackets. So it might be 60 plus, 50 plus, and it will be like that. Which also makes sense because it is much easier to validate a person's age by just checking their driving license or their health card rather than trying to validate pre-existing health conditions, etc. Seemaji has a question.
Are they doing it on the basis of prior registration?
Here, because the health systems are such that all patients have a family doctor, they are already registered within the health system. That is not required. Of course, India being a much larger country where the health system is much more diverse and scattered and not so organized, I would imagine that the registration is required in India. But I believe it is a fairly straightforward method, and it's based upon your Aadhaar card number, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yeah, thank you.
here the government they are developing a special app for this, and people have to register on that. I was thinking all the people don't have the smartphones and the facility for registration online. So I don't know what is going to happen in this confusion.
That's a valid point, and that's it is what it is. But that same app is what will be within their systems, and it will be the one which will alert you for your second dose reminder. It is what they will be able to use to track that you've had the vaccine, also to track which vaccine you've had. Because unlike the UK, again coming back to Ashish's point, the UK has also decided they will go ahead with mixing vaccines, which is another unscientific and a step that they're deciding to take. In India, certainly there is no appetite for mixing vaccines. So if you've had the Bharat Biotech vaccine, you should have the same vaccine the second time, and same applies to the Oxford Serum Institute vaccine as well. So that app will be useful for all of those things. Seemaji, I think we can come to your question.
Yeah, I have a question. The thing is, whenever we are traveling to India, like with my son, we take this travel vaccine. I remember the doctor always used to say, like, you have to take it like at least 3 to 4 weeks before you travel, so that the vaccine, it will kick in. So for somebody who is traveling from Canada to India and the vaccine is already there, and the person takes either Moderna or any vaccine, so how long should that person wait till he travels to India, like to plan to travel to India? So that is what I wanted to know.
Yes. So the fastest one is Moderna. Moderna is the second dose in 3 weeks' time, and the efficacy data, which is over 95%, was 1 week after the second dose. So Moderna is within a month, within 4 weeks of your first dose. Pfizer is a bit slower. Pfizer is 4 weeks apart, and their efficacy data was 2 weeks after the second dose. So that is 6 weeks from the first dose. So Moderna is 4 weeks from the first dose. Pfizer is 6 weeks from the first dose. And generally speaking, when you have a 2-dose vaccine, the maximum immunity will be 2 weeks after your booster dose.
2 weeks. Okay. So will that affect, like, this is the strain is here in Canada it is different, in India it is different. So will it still work in India? Like, do you still have to take something when you go to India? That is what I want to know. Like, if you are staying for a long term, like 3-4 months.
Yes, it will work. In fact, we talk about South Africa strain, UK strain. There are actually thousands of strains of SARS-CoV-2. And we believe that the rate of multiplication of SARS-CoV-2 is that we get about 2 new strains per month. So since January that this came, we've been getting about 2 strains per month, and in fact much more than that. And so, but those strains are all susceptible to the same vaccines. Of course, when there is a strain of interest, like the UK strain or South Africa strain, then the companies themselves will also be testing not just vaccines, but also other treatments like monoclonal antibodies and other kinds of therapeutics against that strain to make sure it still works. And not just therapeutics, also tests. You have to make sure that your nucleic acid amplification tests, your nasal swab, or your lateral flow antigen-based tests, you have to make sure those tests are still picking up those new strains. So be it vaccines, therapeutics, or tests, they all have to keep up pace with the new strains to make sure that all those things are still relevant.
Okay, thank you.
If I have no question for Mandakini ji, no questions from my in-laws, Papa ji, Mummy ji from Pune, they're here as well. Papa ji, any questions at all? And we have Lambis Lamba here as well, who hasn't got it. Mute Papa ji, you're mute. Mute Papa ji आपका phone. First button left में.
स्पीकर पे हाथ लगाइए.
माइक्रोफोन का साइन है पहला बटन वहाँ पे.
कैमरे के पास.
Do you have any other questions at all from Mandakini ji or Miss Lamba at all? while Papaji
Yeah,
figures.
I'm just listening. I'm scared of about my husband because he has a low immunity and he's very anemic. So uh, dangerous or how he can go for this vaccination? I don't know.
Well, I mean, COVID-19 is dangerous. I don't believe the vaccine will be dangerous for him. Yeah.
COVID is of course dangerous, but I don't know how careful he has to be for the vaccination. I don't know.
He doesn't have to
Our
be careful for the vaccination. He should just go ahead and get
doctor
it.
will know maybe what is his condition kind of, or will go according to.
Yes, the vaccines, I get patients who ask me, I'm diabetic, is it safe for me? I have low immunity, is it safe for me? Well, I mean, those clients are people who should be getting the vaccine. They need the vaccine more than other people do. Of course, there are certain things you have to be considerate about. In India, for example, if you have immune suppression, if you are pregnant, for example, and decide to go for a vaccine, then an inactivated vaccine like Bharat Biotech would be a better option than a live vaccine like the Oxford one. But so the physician can always guide you in the right direction. But generally speaking, the SARS-CoV-2 is much more dangerous than the vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Sarpan.
Seemaji has a question.
Doctors,
You're mute, Seemaji, again. Oh, and Lamaji is going ahead. Go ahead, Lamaji.
no, same thing, doctor. I'm also diabetic, so I keep debating. Is it the right thing to take? What would be the side effects? Right now we managed to be safe so long. So, that question is always in my head, right? So
Yeah,
I
so
don't really know. I mean, I'm sure if I get it, it would be worse, right? And if I take the vaccination, at least I won't die and I'll be protected in some way, right? So those kind of in my mind it goes, right? So I'm not 100% yet.
So, Miss Lamba, it's actually very straightforward. Everything we do in life has a risk attached to it. So, we cross the road, it is possible we might get hit by a bus and die. That could happen. So, but we decide, we look at the risk, the benefits of crossing the road, and we look at the risk of crossing the road, and we decide whether to cross the road or not. That is what we do in our daily life, and the same applies here. Like I said to you, with the Moderna Pfizer vaccines, there is 1 in 100,000 risk of a severe allergic reaction. So far, the 11 reactions that have occurred, no one has died. They all needed medication. Perhaps they needed Benadryl. Perhaps they needed to go into hospital for a day. They all survived. In the Oxford vaccine, there were 2 cases of transverse myelitis. There were also a few cases of Bell's palsy, neurological complications. Again, the cases of transverse myelitis went to hospital. They were given some medication. They came back and they survived. So far, no one who's been given the vaccine has died because of the vaccine. And you look at the other side, COVID-19 on average worldwide about 1% death rate. The older you are, the more comorbidities you have, the rate goes up to 20 to 40% even. The older you get, the more complications you have. And so for most people, particularly patients who are higher risk, I would describe it as a no-brainer. The decision itself is a no-brainer because it's a minuscule risk versus quite a significant risk. If this was a vaccine for, let's say, Zika virus, as an example, and you had almost zero risk of getting Zika virus infection here in Canada, then I would not recommend this vaccine to you, because I would say to you, you have virtually no risk of getting Zika virus, so why would you take the vaccine? But this is not a vaccine for Zika virus, this is a vaccine for SARS-CoV-2. We are much more likely to get it, and we are much more likely to get complications from it. So the vaccine makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
I think, Dr. Sapan, none of us will get this vaccine before March or April, I guess so. Even my parents are in 70s, and they're saying they may not even receive it until April. And until April, there's going to be tons of data, whether it's safe or not. So there's one thing in our favor, which is time, and millions of people will receive it.
Yes, you're right, Ashish. By the time you will get so much information.
And that's what I said. That's why I say, while you're waiting, why not go get those other vaccines? So read my blog about pneumonia vaccine, shingles vaccine, which is for above 50s. Also read my blog about considering antibody tests for MMRV. The last injection we have of MMRV, which is measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, is at age 4. And I see a lot of people beyond the age of 40, their antibody titers of MMRV are waning. And those patients would be eligible for a booster shot of MMRV. And it's a live vaccine. And there is some evidence that live vaccines can boost your innate immune system, which is your primary defense immune system. And consider all of those things. Consider the flu vaccine if you haven't had the flu vaccine yet. The pneumonia vaccine, considering that 10% of COVID-19 becomes complicated by secondary bacterial pneumonia, it makes a lot of sense to have the pneumonia vaccine to me. So I have a message here from Christian saying, hi doctor, sorry I've joined a bit late. You're more than welcome, Christian, to be with us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type it in and I'll be able to answer your questions. I have a message here from Facebook Live as well. Beena ji says, great session as always. Let me see what the question is. So she says, what are the chances of getting COVID-19 after the vaccine if we live a normal life as usual? Well, Beena ji, that is exactly what the efficacy data is all about. So as we discussed previously in this video though, the efficacy data is not the same for all vaccines. Some of them tested asymptomatic, some of them tested symptomatic only. But the published data is for Moderna and Pfizer 94 to 95%, for Oxford AstraZeneca 62% with the 2 full doses, which is the standard protocol they were following. Bharat Biotech, we do not have the data yet. However, the important part is, as of me publishing this video today, no one has died of COVID-19 who received a vaccine, and more than 5 million people have received COVID-19 in North America, have received the Pfizer or Moderna mRNA vaccine. Over 250,000 people in the UK have received the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And so if you look at efficacy as stopping you from dying of COVID-19, so far it's 100%. Of course, until we start getting some degree of herd immunity, we will all have to be a bit patient and still maintain some degree of masking and social distancing, because there will still be that small risk of getting SARS-CoV-2 and spreading it to others, although it will be unlikely that you will become sick with it yourself. Papaji, are you able to, from Pune, are you able to unmute yourself? Just try unmuting yourself. In the meantime, Seemaji, you have a question.
Yeah, so similar to the flu vaccine, like COVID and flu vaccine, they recommend you have to take every year, right? So starting from 2022, we took first dose. So next year again, do we have to take the dose like every year for COVID?
Yeah, so the answer for that is we don't know. With SARS-CoV-1, we have documented cases of patients who had the infection. Now this is not vaccination, this is infection, who still have antibodies today, 19 years afterwards. So the answer is we don't know. We are vaccinating a lot of people. When we do these vaccinations, we actually call it a phase 4 trial. So even when we receive the vaccine, it's still part of a trial. A cohort of us will have blood tests looking for neutralizing antibodies. Of course, there will be surveillance done on how many people who get vaccination get COVID-19. And at the end of that year, there will be a judgment call made, I would imagine, as to whether a booster is required or not.
Okay, thank you.
Ashish, go ahead, while my parents hopefully from Pune hopefully try to unmute their phone.
Dr. Chappan, I have a very, it's a stupid question you can ask. You can say, sorry. I hear Canadian government saying, oh, we have not received data from AstraZeneca. Other governments saying, oh, we have not received data from this company, that company. Why these companies have to, send data to all these countries? Why cannot they put it on their website, have a secure link, so that it doesn't fall in hands of any unwanted people or from their confidentiality perspective, but let the Canadian government download and approve it. It's bureaucracy, red tape. I don't know. I think it should be simple. Why companies have to submit data?
Yeah, good question. I think in the case of AstraZeneca, it's that's what they're putting it out to be. But as much as I love the Oxford University and the science behind it, the DNA recombinant adenovirus, the scientific method, unfortunately, I feel that this company has not been the most, they have been disingenuous with a lot of their data. As I described earlier, they had a small subset who received the wrong dose of vaccine. They then published that data as 90% efficacious, although that was a very small subset who had received an incorrect dose. Later, when they were asked to publish their efficacy, they then took an average of those two doses, which again was disingenuous. So I think the Health Canada is trying to polish it around a bit, but actually what's happening is AstraZeneca has not been very upfront with the actual numbers, which is why they're having to keep going back to them.
So the chances are they may not get approved here.
Canada is a very unique situation, Ashish. Canada has bought the most vaccine than any other country. Canada has bought enough vaccine to vaccinate their entire population 7 times. So, and it is possible Canada will buy a lot of vaccine and then sell it on, almost like subletting to other countries. So Canada is in a unique position, and what one wonders is, considering Canada is a relatively wealthy country with a small population of just 35 million, 1/10 of the US, should Canada actually be licensing vaccines which could be 62% effective when we already have vaccines which are 95% effective? That is a bit of a tricky question if you think about it. Considering that you have so much availability of vaccine, a small population, I think one question they're wrestling with is whether to go with a less efficacious vaccine. In countries like India, clearly is required. In the third world, where they cannot afford a $30 vaccine, where they do not have the minus 70-degree cold chain refrigerators, they cannot make those huge investments. You can clearly understand how the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Bharat Biotech vaccine and other vaccines by Sinopharm, Sinovac, Chinese vaccines, perhaps even the Russian vaccine, will help. However, one wonders whether countries like Canada and the US need the AstraZeneca vaccine, and also whether they can just wait for the Johnson vaccine, which is coming next month, because the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is also refrigerated temperature. It's also fridge 2 to 8 degrees temperature. And so I suspect that is the kind of things that Health Canada is wrestling with at this time.
Thank you.
मम्मी जी आप ट्राई करो, ये अनम्यूट करो, जो वहाँ पे माइक्रोफोन है का बटन, नीचे 3 बटन है, उनमें से पहला बटन जो है वो दबाओ, एक बार स्क्रीन दबाओ, उसके बाद पहला बटन, फिर आप हमें बता सकते हैं कि क्या अपडेट क्या है पुणे से. Pune is actually the center of vaccine development. That is where
Serum Institute,
Serum
right?
Institute is there, and
my parents I'm from Pune.
You're from Pune? I
Yes.
guessed that just by the name Nayak. I guessed you were from Pune.
Yeah, I'm from South India, but I am born and brought up in Pune. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Very nice.
3 बिंदियां हैं और एक तरफ वीडियो है, बीच में स्पीकर है, तो स्पीकर पे टच करिए तो ठीक हो जाएगा.
अच्छा बीच में है मम्मी? अच्छा मेरे स्क्रीन पे पहला होता है.
हमारे यहाँ पे वीडियो और 3 बिंदी के बीच में है स्पीकर.
अच्छा पापा जी बीच का बटन है,
स्पीकर पे हाथ लगा,
तीनों में से बीच का बटन है वो.
हाँ,
उसको दबाइए.
ऐसा. हाँ,
हो गया.
हाँ, हो गया. नारायण जी, संदेश जी,
हेलो, नमस्ते
संदेश जी,
नमस्ते जी.
ठीक ठाक.
हाँ तो
नमस्ते
पापा
जी.
जी please go ahead if you have any questions about vaccinations, Bharat Biotech, Oxford vaccine, who should have a vaccine, how it will be done. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Papa ji, do you have any questions?
नहीं, अभी तो कोई नहीं है. अभी यहाँ कुछ पता ही नहीं है कब देंगे, क्या करेंगे, कौन सी देंगे. कुछ पता पड़े तो फिर पूछते हैं उस बारे में.
सही
अभी
बात है, सही बात
अभी तो हियर इज अबाउट ए स्टेज.
आपको सब न्यूज़ सुन के क्या लग रहा है? अब न्यूज़ में काफ़ी आया है भारत बायोटेक और ऑक्सफोर्ड। आपको क्या लगता है, आप कौन सा वाला लेना चाहोगे अगर आपको चॉइस दी जाए तो?
अब ये पता नहीं है मेरे को, अभी कुछ डिसाइड नहीं हुआ. वैसे क्या होना
I say
चाहिए,
Bharat Biotech.
वैसे इंडिया के लिए क्या होना चाहिए, व्हाट इज द बेस्ट?
भारत बायोटेक अच्छा है, भारत बायोटेक
Bharat Biotech is safer.
मेड इन इंडिया.
अच्छा.
मेड इन इंडिया इज गुड.
Yeah, don't go for made in China, right?
देखिए देखिए क्या है कि the situation is that I feel that if you look at the scientific modeling, if you look at the animal studies, immunogenicity studies, safety studies, Bharat Biotech appears to be a very safe vaccine. Certainly,
Yes.
if you compare it to the Oxford vaccine, they had transverse myelitis, they had Bell's palsy, there were neurological complications. It is a live vaccine. Live vaccines can be more reactogenic. They can have more neurological complications, and the efficacy is around about 62% for that vaccine. The downside of the Bharat Biotech vaccine is that we do not know what the efficacy data is. The phase 3 has not been completed yet. There is a very small chance that you may receive the Bharat Biotech vaccine, and then the efficacy data may say in next month that it is less than 50% effective, which means that you have to go and get the Oxford vaccine. But I think the chances of that is very, very low, because generally speaking, from animal studies phase 1 and phase 2, you've already got a decent idea as to how effective a vaccine will be. And if just Dr. Ella and other Dr. Powell, other doctors who have been supporting the Bharat Biotech vaccine also state this is a vaccine made using Indian strains, and because it attacks the entire virus and not just the spike protein, it may also be more effective against mutant strains. Hence, if someone decides to take the Bharat Biotech vaccine over the Oxford vaccine, I feel that is a reasonable decision. I'm not here to recommend one vaccine over the other. I think it is reasonable. You just have to be mindful that it will be part of a trial. You will have to sign consent. You will be followed up. And there is a very small chance that you may be told next month that actually the vaccine is less effective. You have to go and get the Oxford vaccine as well. So I have a Christian here who asked a question on YouTube. He says, if you had a choice, which vaccine would you choose? So that's a very nice question, Christian. Thank you for that. Because just now we talked about the Indian vaccines, Oxford vaccine versus Bharat Biotech. Now talking about the vaccines available in North America, which is Pfizer versus Moderna. If I had a choice, and it's unlikely I'll have a choice, in most cases, we just offer a vaccine and we go and get it. I would be inclined slightly towards Moderna vaccine. There are two reasons for that. You pay your money and you get what you get. It's a $30 vaccine, it's the most expensive one. That's a joke. But jokes apart, the data just appears to be slightly better for the Moderna vaccine. Just comparing the two, the Moderna actually showed 80% efficacy 1 week after the first dose, while Pfizer showed about 50 to 60% efficacy. Moderna is a faster course, 3 weeks, and they checked their efficacy, which was 94% 1 week after the second dose, which is in 4 weeks after the first dose. Pfizer, on the other hand, does the second dose in 4 weeks time, and they check their efficacy in 2 weeks after that, just 6 weeks after the first dose. Pfizer did have one case of severe COVID who ended up in ICU, but he survived and came back. Moderna had no cases of severe COVID at all. So from the point of view of severe COVID, Moderna actually has a 100% clean slate. Moderna, we also know, gives you more side effects. Moderna gives you about 10% body pains, fever, pain at site of infection. More side effects than Pfizer. I see that as a good thing. I like side effects because those side effects that you get in your body after a vaccine that tells you that the vaccine is effective, is doing something to your immune system. So I don't see the side effects as a negative. I actually see it as a positive. If I had a vaccine I got no effects, I would be a bit worried. I would think, I hope they didn't just give me water by mistake. So I see those initial side effects as a good thing. So all in all, I feel a bit more inclined towards Moderna vaccine than the Pfizer vaccine. Of course, also there has been slightly more severe allergic reactions, 11 cases out of 1 million, which is 1 in 100,000, but there have been more in the Pfizer vaccine compared to the Moderna vaccine. Again, that's a very small number. That comes out to 1 in 100,000 for the Pfizer vaccine, which is a very acceptable risk level for any kind of vaccine. But for all of those reasons, I feel slightly more inclined. I have to say though, Moderna was licensed about 2-3 weeks after the Pfizer vaccine was. We do have a bit less data for that, and so it may be that once more data comes out, my opinion changes. But based upon the data we have at this time, I feel more inclined towards the Moderna vaccine. Thanks for the question, Christian. Do you have any more questions?
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. Do you have any questions related to the mutant strains of coronavirus? Because I know that's been in the news a lot, and I was expecting a barrage of questions about mutations in coronavirus. Ashish, do you have any mutation questions?
No, thank you. I do not have any mutation question, but I have it's not a question, it's a discussion about what happened with this doctor who got Pfizer vaccine and died, the one death which happened, and it was a placebo. So about legal aspect, the person who got it doesn't know it's a placebo, and that person may be open in market, going everywhere thinking that, hey, he's protected from this vaccine, and then finally he gets it and dies, and then company says, oh, it was a placebo. So isn't it a moral responsibility to, I understand it plays placebo, but he had a placebo, not a vaccine.
Yeah, and that's why patients who take part in a trial, they are given, often they're given financial compensation, and also they sign the consent form, and that risk is in that consent form. So these people do a sacrifice for the purpose of extending science and allowing us to live safe lives. So we have to be very appreciative of the sacrifice these people make. But yes, taking part in a trial is a sacrifice.
Yes.
And of course, there were lots of news articles about other people. Someone had a heart attack, someone had a stroke. When you give a trial vaccine to 100,000 people, a lot of those people will unfortunately get hit by a bus, or they'll fall off a cliff, or they will have a heart attack or a stroke. And so a lot of these things happen. A lot of those things are not connected to the vaccine in any shape or form. It is just bad luck. Of course, the being part of a trial that will be investigated, but a lot of those things do turn out to be just bad luck, and not even with Bell's palsy. The investigation done showed that the incidence of Bell's palsy in the vaccine arm was the same as the general population. So there was no correlation shown, saying that with live vaccines, there was a slightly higher risk of neurological misfiring.
So did this person, do they tell when trial happens that you may have a placebo and you are not protected by any way?
Yeah, the placebo, it is different actually in different vaccine arms. In all the other vaccines, it was just a saline injection, salt water. In the Oxford-Zeneca placebo, they actually gave meningitis vaccine as the placebo. So both arms would actually feel pain, and they might both get a reactogenic reaction, which was interesting. There was even a theory that their figures could be worse because of that, because if that vaccine, like we talk about MMR vaccine, although meningitis is a conjugated vaccine, it's not a live vaccine. In theory, if it were to give you any protection by boosting immunity, your innate immunity, which is your non-specific immunity, that might have actually made their figures look worse. The 62% figure might have been better if they used saline instead of using meningitis vaccine. So that is another hypothetical, just to throw it in there. But but yeah, obviously 50% will have placebo, 50% will have the vaccine. That's just how a trial works. I have a question here from YouTube from Christian. He's asking about the South African strain. Yeah, so just talking about generally about mutations. Mutations happen all the time. There are thousands of different strains of virus. The ones we are getting more interested in, the South African strain and UK strain, are primarily because of a few factors. One, if there are multiple mutations. Secondly, if those mutations are in particular places like the receptor binding domain or receptor binding moiety. And thirdly, there appears to be some epidemiological evidence that mutation is giving that virus a selective advantage in spreading better, being more contagious, shedding in the nasopharynx more. And there appears to be some epidemiological kind of data coming out of the UK particularly. I know in the UK is having a particularly bad time with COVID-19, with I believe almost 1,400 or 1,500 deaths per day, which if you consider it has a population of about 65 million, if that kind of death rate happened in the US with a population of 330 million, that would equate to about 7,000 deaths per day in the US. So UK's per capita is having a particularly bad time with SARS-CoV-2, which is why I also understand the kind of drastic measures they've taken with regards to 3-month delay between vaccination doses to try to vaccinate as many people as possible, mixing vaccines. They're just, rather desperate in trying to get it under control, which in some cases they're not following science in that desperation, which is a gamble, it might well work out in their favor, or it might not, we don't know. But Christian, with regards to these strains, be it South African or UK strain, there is really no definitive evidence that we need to be particularly worried about them. The Pfizer vaccine, for example, has been testing, and they said that the vaccine still works. I'm sure the other vaccines, monoclonal antibodies and testing kits, they will also be testing against these variants to make sure all these things still work. And if for any reason it appears that the variant is escaping, then they have methods of adapting their vaccine or test assay or lateral flow assay or therapeutic to adapt to the variant. Because for most of these vaccines, in fact all of them, there was a degree of genetic engineering which takes place, and when one variant becomes more predominant, then you can engineer the genetic, do the genetic engineering again and just include that variant as well. So personally, I'm not too concerned about these. Of course, the main thing we have to do is that if these variants are more transmissible, and it appears to be 70% more transmissible in the case of the UK variant, then we just have to be a bit more careful with everything we do with regards to social distancing, masking, and trying to reduce the transmission. It may be that if a virus is more transmissible, that 6 weeks is not good enough. We need actually 6 feet distance is not good enough. Maybe we need 7 feet distance for that more transmissible strain because of increased shedding from the nasopharynx. We don't know that. No studies have been done. We have no data for that, but we just have to be a bit more careful with the new strains. Great, so that was a great session. I believe we have covered a lot of things. So I would like to quickly just at the end just finish off by telling everyone about my protocol for how to treat COVID-19 early. I will just go ahead and mute everyone. At this time, I am treating about 15 patients with COVID-19. So far, I have treated about 70 patients with COVID-19. I'm happy to report that about half of my patients were high risk. In fact, several of them were above the age of 70 even. And I'm happy to report that so far, none of my patients needed to go into hospital. So if I quickly tell you about my North America protocol, you can find my blog within the description of the video. So this is how we treat COVID-19 using scientific and also traditional medicine. This is divided into various parts. The first part is how to treat high-risk contacts. So we also use this protocol to prevent COVID-19 and also to treat low-risk patients who may be asymptomatic or have minimally symptomatic disease. Then the second part is how to treat those same patients when they get more generalized systemic symptoms. Third is treatment of increased risk individuals. Then we also talk about monitoring, indication for hospitalization, what supplements can be used during hospital stay, and also prevention of long COVID. We also have a section on how to boost immunity for normal population and how to reduce any pre-existing inflammation in that population. There's a separate blog for India. There's a separate blog for the scientific evidence. Here I try to explain that the studies that I've quoted in my blogs, in my analysis, is meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials, observational studies, cell studies, molecular docking studies, and scientific papers. However, this body of evidence is not sufficient to guide international prescribing protocols. If you were to ask the ICMR, NHS, Health Canada, or FDA, there is no treatment, no approved licensed treatment for early COVID-19. But I feel that we need strong, 10,000 patient meta-analysis, systematic reviews for prescription medication. However, when we're dealing with safe items, which can be bought over the counter, often these have been derived from traditional medicine, which have scientific basis. However, we know these are very safe because it's available over the counter. Had they not been safe, they would not be available over the counter. Then I feel that we do not need that degree of scientific base to recommend those, which is the reason that I recommend these. Also, patients appreciate that COVID-19 is a complex, multifaceted disease. There may not be one silver bullet, one treatment which will just cure the problem. We need multiple strategies. So we need early on, we need to boost our immunity, and later on, we need to reduce viral replication. Later in the disease, we also need to reduce inflammation and reduce blood clotting tendency. So the treatment I recommend for high-risk contacts and low-risk COVID-19 is a combination of natural antivirals, quercetin and bromelain, 2 twice a day, black cumin oil, 2 twice a day, curcumin 2 twice a day, and increased doses of vitamins to bring this in line with the Math Plus protocol, which is FLCCC's protocol mentioned in my other blogs, vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc on higher doses. Level 2 for patients who have more generalized systemic symptoms like fever, tiredness, body pains, or generally just not getting better despite level 1 treatment, I recommend N-acetylcysteine, melatonin, magnesium, and thiamine. For level 3 treatment is patients who are progressing despite of that, and there will be high-risk patients who will go straight to level 3. So level 3, of course, here means level 3, 2, and 1. When you move up a level, you still stay with what you're doing in the previous level. And here I add an aspirin with famotidine. With the 15 patients that have active COVID-19 right now who I'm following up, they are sending me all of these parameters daily. They generally Skype message me those parameters. Temperature, breathing rate, blood pressure, pulse rate, and a pulse oximeter reading, which is after a 6-minute walk. They're told to gargle 3 times a day with either Listerine or betadine for 2 minutes each. And we talk about the other things that you should be doing. You should be staying active. You should do yoga so that you can stay active. You should do pranayama, which is breathing exercises, so that you can maintain your breathing. If you're a back liar, you should be trying more to lie on your front. There are certain types of things in your diet which are more anti-inflammatory. Next week, Seema ji and I will be discussing these things, but particularly with regards to the inhibition of the JAK-STAT pathway, which is an inflammatory pathway in our body. I recommend adding in things like kalonji seeds, turmeric, methi, elaichi, ginger, etc. Black pepper as well. And here we talk about which patients need to go into hospital, what supplements they could take in hospital, and what supplements can be taken. to prevent long COVID. I'm happy to report none of my patients have long COVID, despite having treated about 70 patients. And there was a trial from Bristol which showed that up to 40% of patients can have long COVID. In my case, it's 0%. So I asked my patients for at least a month after COVID to take, low-risk patients to take at least N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C, and omega-3 fatty acids. And patients with higher risk to also take aspirin, famotidine, and melatonin with magnesium. For general population, I recommend a high-dose multivitamin which contains extra zinc. So this 50 plus 1 a day contains 24 milligrams of zinc. That's what I take myself, even though I'm not 50 years old myself. Anyone who receives less than 30 minutes of sunlight a day should be taking extra vitamin D. If your diet lacks fresh fruits, vegetables, and salads, you should be taking extra vitamin C. If you're vegetarian, you should be considering extra vitamin B12. If you have any cardiovascular or metabolic risk factors, you should be considering a combination of omega-3 fatty acids and coenzyme Q10. And the usual medicine that we recommend for treatment of other conditions like statins to reduce cholesterol, fibrates, ACE inhibitors, ARBs, metformin for sugar, and aspirin, blood thinners, have also been shown in observational studies to be associated with less complication related to COVID-19. So these should be continued. Of course, it's also very important to maintain a healthy weight, stay active, reduce your stress levels, sleep well, have a healthy, varied diet. And all of these things are very important to boost immunity. And we'll be talking a lot more about immunity next week when I have my talk with Seema ji, who's a nutritionist, a holistic nutritionist. Here I talk about the risk factors which we consider high risk. I'll quickly just show you the Ashish is messaging me, but I'm also following myself on Facebook and YouTube. Ashish, thank you. And it appears that the freezing might be on your end. On my end, I can see everything's working quite fine. I'd like to just highlight my scientific evidence blog as well, which I quite like. So the scientific evidence blog is here, and here I've mentioned the scientific evidence of all of these modalities of treatment, from vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, vitamin B12, thiamine, melatonin, aspirin. Let me just make sure this works. Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me from, or am I muted? Oh. Alright, I'll just stop presentation. Oh, hi everyone. Can you everyone hear me? Oh, looks like we've run into a problem there. So I think we'll just put an end to the presentation now. And I'd like to just thank everyone